This video is a critique which is considered fair use under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. I do not own any of these clips. This is simply fan-made for entertainment purposes only. Futurama is owned by 20th Century Fox, Matt Groening, David X. Cohen, Comedy Central, and Rough Draft Studios. Enjoy! Well guys, I owe you all a big, fat thank you. Because of all of you, I've now hit 1,500 subscribers. Another milestone accomplished, all thanks to the support you guys have given me over these last few months. As a thank you, I'm making July the month of Cynical Top 5's. And what better way to start this month off than with the top 5 worst Futurama episodes. Now before you guys instantly hit the dislike button because you saw the word worst next to your favorite television show, I've done 2 top 10 best lists on this show, so watch those instead if you can't handle criticism. And I've said before that Futurama is my all-time favorite television show. I love the characters, I love the stories, I love the humor, I love the creativity. It's just an all-around wonderful show. But like all great shows, there are some episodes that aren't too great, or at least not as good as others. Now I already did a review on Proposition Infinity, an episode I personally wasn't a fan of, but there are episodes that are not only as bad, but some that are actually worse than Proposition Infinity. And I'm counting down the top 5 episodes I personally feel are the worst of this series. Now it goes without saying that Proposition Infinity will not be on this list, as well as any Christmas specials or any of the movie episodes, like Beast with a Billion Backs or Beast with a Billion Backs. So sit back and enjoy the start of the month of Cynical Top 5's. This is the top 5 worst Futurama episodes. Number 5. A Lila of Her Own. Alright, let's be honest. How many of you guys even remember this episode? Exactly, this is probably the most boring episode of Futurama. Now I said in my SpongeBob review that I didn't think Dear Vikings was too bad of an episode, it was just boring. But a kid's show can get away with having boring episodes as they have more restrictions on them. But an adult show with very little restrictions has no excuse to make a boring episode in my opinion. This episode starts out with Planet Express getting new neighbors from a foreign planet. And this is literally how the crew gets introduced.
Signoids on our block? Fine fool! They should go back where they came from.
Farnsworth, you fucking racist!
Society's never going to make any progress until we all learn to pretend to like each other.
Huh?
Now let's go over there and make these hideous strangers feel welcome.
Oh my god. Well, the neighbors own a pizza joint, and Lila tells them that their pizza is horrible and makes them cry. Oh, that's pleasant.
I'm gonna teach you to sell pizza, Earth style.
Oh, thank you, magic biped.
Okay, this episode goes really overboard with the foreigner stereotypes. I mean, it's like Rolf if they got rid of all charm and likability and originality. The crew introduces the foreign aliens to Blurn's Ball, and Lila takes up the position of pitching, and she's horrible. But because she's so horrible, she's able to draw a crowd? I don't know. But because she can draw a crowd, she gets signed by the Mets and becomes the worst, I mean the first, woman to play Major League Blurn's Ball.
I will become the best Blurn's Ball player of all time.
That's statistically impossible. In 77 innings, you haven't gotten a single out. At this rate, you're sure to go down as the worst Blurn's Ball player of all time.
I mean, I'm a big sports fan, and I love a good baseball story as much as the next guy. I mean, Family Guy, The Simpsons, and The Fairly Odd Parents have made some really good baseball episodes that I still remember. But I think this is why I don't particularly enjoy this episode. Futurama stated in an earlier episode that they spiced up baseball, which is fucking awesome. I mean, making an episode around that can work out very well. But this episode is really just a regular baseball episode, and that's such a letdown because in Fear of a Bot Planet, Blurn's Ball looks like a fucking epic sport. It'd be awesome to see an episode focused around that, and it can be so creative, like the baseball version of the late Philip J. Fry. But instead, it's nothing more than an ordinary baseball episode with a little bit of racism and sexism sprinkled in. Nothing more to really say. This episode was just a complete swing and a miss.
Hey, kid, catch.
Number 4. Bendis Love. Again, this one shares similar problems with a Lila of Her Own. It's very boring, but not only that, it's also a little bit uncomfortable. Now I just want to say, these are the only episodes I put on this list that, yes, while I think they're a bit boring, I don't genuinely hate them. There are only 3 episodes I genuinely don't like that have bigger problems than just simply being boring. But we'll get to those later. Now in this episode, Bender's been bending in his sleep, so he gets a job as a bender to work out his issues. Alright, decent idea so far. There he runs into Flexo, who in an earlier episode got arrested for a crime Bender had committed, but Flexo quickly forgives him for that. And Bender meets and falls for a female bending unit named Angeline, who happens to also be Flexo's ex-wife. So, yeah, it's gonna be a love triangle episode.
You degenerate hussy! I'm disappointed in you too, Angeline!
Well, Bender ends up not trusting Angeline, so he poses as Flexo to catch her in the act of two-timing on him with himself. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. See, I have a lot of trouble believing Bender's love for Angeline is genuine when Bender is a proven man whore. I mean, Angeline just doesn't seem that different from any other woman that Bender's been interested in, and he just seems like he's acting overdramatic to me. And I don't know if that's what the episode was going for.
Bender, it's not what you think.
Oh, God, then it's worse than I think. I don't even love anybody pretending to be him.
Well, maybe I love you so much I love you no matter who you're pretending to be.
Oh, how I wish I could believe her. Understand that.
Oh my God, shut up.
Well, Angeline catches Bender in the act, and Bender believes she's still in love with Flexo and decides to kill Flexo.
There's only one reasonable course of action now. Kill Flexo. Ow!
Okay, his love for her is so strong that he wants to kill Flexo? And because Bender was impersonating Flexo and acting like an asshole, the mob actually tries to take Flexo out, and Angeline confesses her love for him, which was caused by Bender impersonating him.
You can't die. Tonight, Bender showed me that I love you. Could never love anyone as much as you made me realize I love Flexo.
Yeah, I don't get that either. And then Bender saves Flexo. Honestly, this episode is just kind of a mess. I mean, it just feels underwritten and rushed to me. I don't find it too hilarious, and I don't find it too engaging. And the whole love triangle thing, there's potential, it's just not fully brought out, and that just makes this episode seem very sloppy to me. But like I said, these aren't the episodes I genuinely hate. The next 3 are.
I'm sad now.
Number 3. The Root of All Evil. This episode is about Cupert, Professor Farnsworth's clone, and Dwight, Hermes' son, starting a rival business against their dads. Okay, so first off, Cupert isn't interesting, and Dwight has never been mentioned before this episode. So, there's not really too much potential in that. Now, the secondary storyline is actually really funny. It's about Bender, Lila, and Fry making their own beer, and they're treating it as if Bender's pregnant, which is, without a doubt, the highlight of this episode.
Is it okay? I can't hear anything.
It's an ale! 5 gallons, 6 ounces!
Sadly, the main storyline isn't all that good. Cupert and Dwight get suspended from school for defending themselves against a bully. Okay, that's actually a fair shot at how bad the school system is. And Cupert, Dwight, Farnsworth, and Hermes? Well, they kill this episode. Cupert and Dwight are honestly pretty annoying, but, I mean, they are kids, so I guess I can let most of what they do go, but aside from that, they are just so bland. They have no definitive characteristics other than just being kids, and there's not much to them. So, it's not really easy for them to hold an episode on their own.
And blowing you a kiss. Mwah.
Ah! Taking evasive action!
And... gotcha!
The only thing you fully understand about them is what they want from their dads, but that's because it's hammered in so much.
Aren't you impressed now, Pops? Aren't you? Aren't you? Our dads are never impressed, no matter what we do. We just wanted you to be proud of us.
But instead of Hermes and Farnsworth telling their kids that they're proud of them, they find more joy in constantly breaking their kids down.
What if a paper were to land in a puddle?
Civilization as we know it might get splashed. But you still don't have your own building or conference table or one of those things.
Hello.
Welcome to the world of business.
Daddy wasn't there to take me to the fair. It seems he doesn't care.
So yeah, that's kind of a killer there. Farnsworth and Hermes just seem too out of character and way too mean-spirited. Cupid and Dwight are just not interesting, and all around, this episode is just very uncomfortable. Not really much else to say about it. Number 2. That's Lobster Attainments! Let me say this. There isn't really a main character I genuinely hate in Futurama. Each character has their own charm and lovable nature to them, and it's really hard to actually hate any of them for me. Even Farnsworth, who's been a racist, homophobe, neglectful parent, and sexist, I still think is a charming and likable character. But one character I enjoy so much is Zoidberg. I think he's a funny character, and I think he can be very entertaining. With that said, Zoidberg can't really hold a comedic episode by himself. I mean, in Stench and Stenchability, his storyline is great, but not in a comedic way, more in a well-written love story kind of way. And his inability to hold a good comedic episode is shown in full view when they bring in his obnoxious as fuck uncle to this episode.
Cut it! Pui! I said this is a talkie, damn it! You've got to emote more!
In this episode, after a painful scene where Zoidberg tries to do stand-up comedy and gets booed off stage...
On Earth, everybody is always looking for a giant squid. On my planet, up! I've got more!
He contacts his uncle Harold Zoid to help him out with his comedy, because Harold was apparently a comedic genius in silent films. Harold decides to use Zoidberg, as he mistakenly believes Zoidberg is rich, to help him finance a dramatic movie he wrote that he believes will put him back on top. Since Zoidberg isn't rich, Bender and Zoidberg enlist Calculon to help finance the movie, and Bender promises him he'll win an Oscar for it. But during filming, it's incredibly obvious that Harold has no idea what he's doing.
And you extras, wave your arms and make faces! What is this, a morgue?
Sir, I call upon you not as a president, but as a father!
And the movie bombs, destroying both Harold and Calculon's careers.
You get me that Oscar, or you're dead!
In order to save his uncle, Zoidberg basically hijacks the Oscars to give the award to Calculon. But instead, he decides to give it to his uncle. And, okay, that's not a bad gesture at all, but I don't feel it's as effective as it should have been, because Harold is just an unpleasant character. He seems way too full of himself, and even though I get that it must be rough to have fame and lose it, the episode doesn't make it too relatable, and I'm not too satisfied when Zoidberg does this for his uncle. Honestly, of all the episodes of Futurama, I think this one is, by far, the most underdeveloped one. Bendis Love may have been a little messy, but this episode is a fucking college dorm room level of messy. There's so much filler, the story is so underwritten, the characters are not brought out to their entirety, and to me, that's kind of weird, seeing as the episode focuses so much on Harold's movie, and yet it still feels underdone and weighed down by filler and unfunny jokes. So yeah, if this is Lobstertainment, then I recommend something else to occupy your time. And before I reveal number 1, I just want to name a few honorable mentions. Inagata de Lila. This episode really just has a horrible ending. I mean, the fact that it ends with Fry watching Lila and Zap having sex to save the world is just a hard shot in the balls for dear sweet Fry.
For God's sake, censor it! Censor it!
Approved for all audiences.
But aside from that, I don't really think it's too bad. I think it's actually a decent little parody of the Adam and Eve story. A Pharaoh to Remember. A pretty mean-spirited episode where Bender wants to be remembered after he dies and becomes a tyrannical pharaoh. But, not gonna lie, it seems like the equivalent of a South Park episode where Cartman becomes president. I mean, you kind of know how that's gonna go. And the pharaoh scene is pretty quick, so it doesn't feel dragged out. And it's not as mean-spirited as it could have been, considering the fact that they drained Bender of all of his morals in this episode. Bend her. Now, I've heard a lot of people argue that this episode is transphobic and sexist. Well, you can definitely argue sexist, but I don't think it's really transphobic. I mean, yeah, Bender gets a sex change and becomes a woman, but I don't know, it doesn't really feel like this is a shot at transgenders, and it feels more like it's using the sex change as a plot device. It doesn't really poke fun at transgender stereotypes, and the idea of Bender being a woman can actually work. However, they just don't really take advantage of what they can do with Bender as a woman. He acts the same, he seems the same, nothing really changes. And yes, there are numerous sexist shots everywhere in this episode.
Dear Lord, a coaster! The Femsoil must be sashaying girlishly into your processor. She's becoming a slave to her emotions, just like all women. Particularly you, Lila. Oh.
I'm worried about him too, Professor.
But because of what my number 1 is going to be, I couldn't talk about this episode's sexism without repeating myself. And speaking of that, number 1, Newtopia. Oh my god, where do I begin with this episode? Alright, how about I start off by saying one possibly positive thing about this episode. Out of all the episodes on this list, this is the one I've watched the most. And because of that, I didn't want to put it at number 1. With that said, the reason I've watched it so much, and the reason I am putting it at number 1, is because I am genuinely confused by it, and I keep trying to figure out what its intent was. Because I have absolutely no idea what this episode was trying to do. This episode focuses around Planet Express going out of business, so they come up with an idea to earn enough money by making a sexy calendar. Alright, not gonna bash the idea, because sexy calendars have kind of gone through an equal rights kind of thing. But the men in this episode act so sexist throughout this episode, and it's so out of character. I mean, they don't even come off as the same characters with the way they act.
Lila, Amy, come to work topless tomorrow.
It's too hot.
Did one of you chicks change the thermostat?
Oh, please, Lila. Who ever heard of a plane with a woman president? In your face, decumbent urinators.
Who are you? What have you done with the men of Planet Express?
All female employees must pose nude if requested.
That's discriminatory.
No, it's in all our contracts. Here's mine. All female employees must pose nude if requested.
Well, because they don't have enough women to make a sexy calendar, Lila comes up with an idea to make an airport. All the men say it's stupid, and then Farnsworth steals the idea, and he's a genius.
We'll turn it into a commercial airline.
But that was my idea.
Then you should have talked louder. Oh, ow, ow, I'm a genius. Ow.
Alright, this is offending me right now. Like, I get it, this episode is trying to show how stupid men who do this look, but there's a reason this fails, and I'll get to that later. The ship ends up crashing on a barren wasteland planet, and they come across a rock alien. So what do the men decide to do?
Interesting. Come on, men, let's kill him.
All men are violent. Sure, why not? Well, the rock alien decides to test the two genders, and now not only are they going to poke fun at men's stereotypes, they're going to poke fun at women's stereotypes as well.
Which is larger, an Italian size 4 or an American apparel medium? How many calories are in a small green tea yogurt? Name any 12 of the desperate housewives.
So the rock alien tells them they need to make it to an ice cave to avoid burning to death on the planet. And neither of them want to work together, so they both fail. Then he finally just neuters them all, which is actually the best part of this episode. Really, when they're neutered, it leads to some funny and pretty damn cool scenes.
Look, associates, I made a hammock from our clothing.
How industrious.
Do you mind if we sleep with you?
I have no opinion. Well, good night.
Until they demand their sex organs back, but the rock alien gives them all the wrong gender, and then gets killed by Zap Brannigan.
Well, hello from the neck down.
Now here's where I get into my confusion with this episode. At first, I thought they were going to use this to teach the men a lesson about being sexist. Like, make them suffer through the same torment they made the women suffer. I mean, that sounds reasonable, right? But instead, the women are made miserable being guys, and the guys enjoy being women and find so much fun out of it.
OMG, being chicks is so much fun.
Now when I say stupid things, guys all laugh and buy me stuff.
The only retribution the women seem to get is that they use the men to finish their calendar. Oh, that's fucking lovely. And then they get their genders fixed and no one learns a goddamn thing.
So what did you like better, my love? Being a man or a woman?
I don't care what parts I have, as long as they interlock with yours.
I'm laughing because I'm uncomfortable and I don't know why.
I really do not get this episode. I mean, there's dumbing the men down to prove a point or to send a message, but there's also a thing called overkill, and that's what this episode did. It straight up overdid it with these sexist attitudes, and again, if you're doing that to teach a lesson, why doesn't anyone learn their lesson? If anything, it seems like the women were the ones you were trying to punish throughout this episode, and I don't get why. If they were trying to openly mock men who act this way, that's fine. But when you make them this sexist, they don't become believable. It's like the villain in Lorax. He's portrayed to be all bad with no good in him whatsoever. So no one can really believe a guy like that can actually exist. And whatever message you're trying to give is lost in the shuffle of fucking obscurity. I just don't get this episode. I really don't. It seems to be the episode that failed the absolute most to me, and I can't say any episode of Futurama annoyed and confused me as much as this one.
In your face, decumbent urinators.
But like I said, I still love this fucking show. I think it's phenomenal, and I still consider it one of the greatest shows ever made. Every show will have a few duds, and it's unavoidable. No matter how smart a show can be, it can always have a few bad episodes. And speaking of smart shows, next up is the top 5 worst South Park episodes.